Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. When we think of long-lasting empires, Rome often comes to mind. But in the East, another powerhouse. The Han Dynasty ruled for over 400 years. That's an incredible stretch of time, spanning generations. So, what was their secret? How did they manage to maintain control for so long, creating a golden age in Chinese history? Today, we're diving deep into the Han Dynasty's recipe for success. We'll explore their brilliant governing strategies, their clever diplomatic maneuvers, and the complex internal power struggles that surprisingly helped them endure. It's a story of ambition, innovation, and resilience. Ready to uncover the secrets of one of history's greatest empires? Let's get started. To understand the Han's longevity, we first have to look back at what came before them. The short-lived Qin dynasty. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, unified China through brute force. He standardized everything from currency to writing, which was revolutionary. But his rule was harsh and legalistic. People were terrified, and the moment he died, his empire crumbled. When Lu Bang, a man of humble origins, founded the Han dynasty, he knew he couldn't make the same mistake. He learned a crucial lesson. You can conquer an empire on horseback, but you can't rule it from there. The Han founders realized that true, lasting power wasn't just about military might. It was about winning the hearts and minds of the people. This led to a brilliant blend of governing philosophies. They kept the effective centralized administration of the Qin but softened its harsh edges by reintroducing Confucian ideals. This combination, known as ruling with both kindness and power, became the bedrock of Han governance. They understood that a stable empire needed both a strong hand and a compassionate heart. This new approach was a game-changer. The early Han emperors focused on recovery. They lowered taxes, reduced forced labor, and generally let the people breathe after the oppressive Qin regime. This policy, known as Huang La Hothat, emphasized governing by non-interference, allowing the economy and the population to recover and grow. It was incredibly effective. Agriculture flourished, trade routes reopened, and the population boomed. But the Han didn't just sit back. They established a sophisticated bureaucracy to manage their vast territory. The empire was divided into commanderies and counties, each with officials appointed by the central government. This ensured that the emperor's policies were implemented across the land, creating a unified and efficient state. But how did they find the right people for these jobs? This is where one of the Han's most enduring innovations comes in. The civil service examination system. While the system was more fully developed in later dynasties, its roots are firmly in the Han. To prevent power from being concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy families, the Han government started recommending officials based on merit, not just birth. Candidates were tested on their knowledge of Confucian classics, literature, and administrative principles. This opened the door for talented individuals from less privileged backgrounds to rise through the ranks. It created a class of scholarly officials who were loyal to the state and the emperor, rather than to their own local power bases. This professional bureaucracy was the engine of the Han Empire. They managed massive projects like the construction of canals and roads, collected taxes, administered justice, and maintained detailed census records that still astonish historians today. This system ensured stability and continuity, even when emperors were weak or incompetent. The government machine just kept running. Now, let's talk about foreign policy. The Han Dynasty wasn't just an internal success story. It was also a major player on the world stage. Their biggest challenge came from the north, from a confederation of nomadic tribes known as the Zhong. These fierce warriors constantly raided Han borders, posing a serious threat to their stability. Early Han emperors tried a policy of appeasement called Hekan, or peace, through kinship. This involved sending Han princesses to marry Zhongnu leaders, along with lavish gifts of silk, wine, and grain. The idea was to bribe them into keeping the peace and, over time, civilize them with Han culture. For a while, it worked, buying the Han precious time to build up their strength. But it was a costly and often humiliating strategy. The Zhongnu would take the gifts and still raid the borders when it suited them. This all changed under the reign of the legendary Emperor Wu, also known as the Marqiao Empire. After decades of building up economic and military power, Emperor Wu decided to go on the offensive. He launched massive military campaigns that pushed deep into Xiongnu territory. These wars were incredibly expensive, nearly bankrupting the state, but they were ultimately successful. The Han military, equipped with superior iron weapons and crossbows, and led by brilliant generals like Wei Qing and Huo Qubin, managed to break the back of the Xiongnu Confederation. This military dominance secured the northern borders and paved the way for one of the most important developments in world history: the opening of the Silk Road. With the Xiongnu threat neutralized, trade caravans could travel safely from the Han capital of Shangan all the way to the Mediterranean. This network of trade routes brought immense wealth and cultural exchange, connecting China with Central Asia, India, and even the Roman Empire. The Han's diplomatic genius wasn't just about war and trade. They were masters of soft power. They established a tributary system where smaller kingdoms in the region would acknowledge the Han Emperor as their overlord. In return for sending tribute, often symbolic gifts, these kingdoms received political recognition, military protection, and valuable trade opportunities. The emperor would bestow titles and official seals upon their rulers, making them part of the Han sphere of influence. This was a much more cost-effective way of managing their neighbors than constant warfare. It created a relatively stable international order in East Asia, with the Han Dynasty at its center. This combination of military projection, strategic trade, and sophisticated diplomacy allowed the Han to not only secure their borders, but also to project their power and culture far beyond them, cementing their status as a true empire. But no empire lasts for 400 years without some serious internal drama. The Han court was a hotbed of political intrigue, with different factions constantly vying for power. The three main groups were the consort families, the eunuchs, and the consort families were the relatives of the empress or the emperor's favorite concubines. When their family member was in favor, they could gain immense influence, often being appointed to top government posts. Then you had the eunuchs. Because they served in the inner palace and had direct access to the emperor and his family, they could become trusted confidants. They were often used by emperors to counterbalance the power of the scholar officials and the consort families. And finally, there were the professional bureaucrats we talked about earlier, who saw themselves as the rightful administrators of the empire and often looked down on the other two groups as corrupt and self. These three factions were locked in a constant, shifting power struggle. When a young or weak emperor was on the throne, the consort families or the eunuchs would often seize control, leading to corruption and instability. The scholar officials would protest, sometimes at the cost of their own lives, creating deep divisions within the court. It sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? And sometimes it was. This infighting did contribute to the temporary collapse of the Western Han, but paradoxically, this internal conflict also might have contributed to the dynasty's longevity. This system of checks and balances, however chaotic, prevented any single group from holding absolute power for too long. If a consort family became too dominant, the emperor might empower the eunuchs to take them down. If the eunuchs overstepped, the scholar officials would rally to expose their corruption. This constant struggle, while messy, created a strange kind of political equilibrium that prevented the state from completely collapsing under the weight of a single, corrupt faction. So, what ultimately brought the Han Dynasty to an end? It wasn't one single thing, but a slow decline caused by a combination of factors. The endless power struggles at court eventually spun out of control. Powerful clans and warlords began to build up their own private armies in the provinces, weakening the central government's authority. The tax system began to break down, as large landowners found ways to evade taxes, placing an ever heavier burden on the peasants. This led to widespread peasant rebellions, most famously the Yellow Turban Rebellion, which ravaged the countryside. The government, weakened by internal division, couldn't effectively respond. Ambitious generals sent to suppress the rebellions ended up becoming independent warlords themselves, carving up the empire into their own personal fiefdoms. By the year 20 AD, the last Han emperor was forced to abdicate, and the once great empire shattered into the Three Kingdoms period. The Han Dynasty's 400-year reign is a testament to its brilliant and adaptable system of governance. By blending strong central control with Confucian ethics, creating a merit-based bureaucracy, and mastering the arts of both war and diplomacy, they built an empire that defined an era. They created a cultural and political identity so powerful that the majority ethnic group in China still refers to themselves as the Han people today. Their legacy is written in the institutions they built, the territory they charted, and the profound influence they had on the course of East Asian history. The story of the Han is a powerful reminder that an empire's strength lies not just in its armies, but in its ideas, its institutions, and its ability to win the loyalty of its people. It's a lesson that remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time.